Welcome back to Digital Tutors. In this final lesson, we're going to talk about what you need to do to get your edit ready for the export and then how to export it and what to do with it from there. So it's pretty simple. We've already gone through, I'm going to mute this again. You can watch it at your leisure and see what we did. Is it perfect? Not at all. I would actually probably spend quite a few more minutes putting in more sound effects and all of that to get the sound mixed the way that I want it. But again, this is all just representational. So I'll let you go through and do what you want with it. Now, what we're going to do is talk about video effects as well. So let's use this as a representational frame. I'm going to go ahead and put some effects on this guy. So in our effects tab, we can just go to our video effects. And again, your effects tab is going to be here, or you can just go to window and turn on your effects. We are going to start off with a little bit of color correction because that's something that I pretty much do to every single shot. There are two that I particularly like. Feel free to play with all of them and learn what they all do, but these are the two that I usually treat everything with. Well, I don't necessarily treat all shots with both, but first is this Luma curve. This is the one that I use on everything. So I'm just going to drag that to this representational frame and we'll talk about what that does. And in this case, the white balance looks pretty good on all these shots, but maybe I want to change that white balance instead of making all the colors true. Like the skin tones look good, the red looks good, the green looks good, all this gray might be a little bit on the blue side instead of the gray side. But for all intents and purposes, the colors look pretty good. But what I want to do is warm it all up a little bit. And so you can just go to the fast color corrector for that. So I'll drag that guy on there as well. Double click on that clip. I go to effect controls. You can see that they're both here ready for me to do stuff too. So let's talk about the Luma curve first. Basically, the way the Luma curve works is in a normal image, this dot right here is black. This dot right here is white, and it's a straight line between black and white. That's the way the contrast is red. That's the way the brightness of the different levels are. So what I like to do is change that relationship a little bit. And this is, like I said, what I do for every single shot that I edit. Go about a third of the way up, put a little keyframe. Go about a third of the way this way, put a little keyframe. And now what I've done is I've separated my blacks from my whites, or my light colored from my dark colored. So what we can do is click on this, and if I bring it down or bring it up, you can see that I'm affecting only the dark parts. The highlights here are not affected by it. It's really all the darker parts. And this is already a relatively dark shot, so we might need to just bring it up a little bit. A lot of times what I like to do is bring it down just a skosh to give myself a little bit more contrast. In this one, I'm probably going to bring my brights down just a little bit. And again, you can see the extremes. You obviously don't want to do the extremes, but you can change just a little bit. And I can make them brighter, make them look a little bit more pale and sinister, I suppose. Or we could bring them down a little bit. If it's just your actual highlights all the way up here, for example, you can always grab the top and get rid of those as well. At a certain point, it just starts to look really gross. So it's a subtle thing. You don't want to move these all over the place. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just brighten that guy up a little. We'll go ahead and we'll darken him a little bit. So you can see that this Luma curve, I didn't change a whole bunch. You might end up changing a lot more for a shot like this, however, or this. So we'll talk about that. Next thing we want to do is mess with our color. Like I said, here's my color wheel. I want to warm things up a little bit, so I'm going to just click on the center and drag it out to the orange. Obviously, you can do extremes in any level. A little green would actually kind of make a little bit of sense because a lot of people like green filters. Reality, if this is supposed to look like it was shot on film, a little bit of red or orange makes more sense because that's kind of what those look like. So I'll go ahead and do this pretty extensive red or orangish extension. And then the other thing that you can do with this is you can still affect the brightness and the darkness within this shot a little bit here if you want to. You can set all of your black, gray, or white levels, and you can mess with your saturation, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to desaturate it a little bit We'll just go to around 70. And you can see that we still have our colors because we added them all up and made them nice reddish warm, which doesn't look very pretty. It looks like a mistake. However, what I'm trying to do is emulate that old film look. And then what I could do is add some grain and some scratches on top of that. And there are some filters that are already in Premiere that you could work with adding grain and adding some noise and stuff like that. Or you can always get a third-party filter and layer it in on top, which is probably what I would do because there's a lot of awesome third-party effects out there that if you just look for them, you can usually get a lot of them for free. Or you can buy a really nice package for relatively inexpensive that has a whole bunch of different effects. So this is what I'm doing. This isn't color corrected per se, it's colorized, and there's a difference. This is closer to color corrected than this. If I wanted to make this proper colors, I would probably just lose a little bit of the blues, as you can see in the skin tones. Now, instead of going through and doing that for every single shot, just like we did with the audio, I can click on this, I can copy it, I can highlight everything. I'm going to deselect this guy by pressing Shift because I don't want to give him 2 layers of all this. And then I can right click and paste attributes. And in this case, I'm not pasting the motion. I don't want to paste anything from the motion. I just want to paste these 2 effects. And I say OK. And now everything has been treated with those same effects. And so let's look for one where we might want to affect it even differently. Let's take a look at this guy, for example. Now I can double click on that and it still has, again, you can see the before and the after. We have the effect controls here. What you might end up having to do is go through and change your Luma. And what I do when I'm doing these effects is I basically figure out what like images I have, and I'll do it for a representation of each of those like images and then copy it and paste it to all the other ones. So this one, I'm going to drop my darks down a little bit more. There we go, a little more dramatic. So you can see the effect there. Fantastic, that's looking suitably cheesy. If I wanted to add any titles or anything like that, I could do that now. I'm not going to. I don't think that this scene needs a title per se. If you wanted to, you could easily add a title. Just go to title, new title, make it a still, name it, and then use all these tools just to make your title card, and then it'll open up in your project right there. Again, if you're doing titles, go ahead and make a little title folder. Don't just let it float out here in the ether. I don't actually want it, so it bothers me. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. But feel free to put titles at the beginning. You could do scrolling credits at the end. You could put whatever other things that you want in here. For all intents and purposes, we're ready for export. So let's go ahead and export it. There are multiple different ways to do this. What I like to do just to ensure that everything's the way that I want is I go and make sure that I'm at the end of my last clip and I put an out point. You can go to the beginning and put an in point as well. Mark the exact sequence. This is also a good way to ensure that you don't have a clip all the way over here, because I have a lot of people when they're editing, they'll put stuff over to the right, and at some point along the line they forget that they have one clip all the way at the 10-minute mark, and then when they go to export the whole sequence, it's 10 minutes instead of a minute and a half. So it's just a good habit to have, is to mark your in and out points. So now I go to File, Export, Media, and here we go. Sequence into out. It's already selected the way I want it. You can preview it. Now you notice that there's a black bar at the top and the bottom. That's not a good sign. That's not what I actually want. I want it to fill this frame. I don't want to put it in black bar at the top and the bottom. So what I do is I'll go here. We'll do QuickTime right here. Format is QuickTime. I'll go to my video. I'll go to my video codec and I'm going to do ProRes 422. You could also always do H.264 if you wanted to. That is pretty good. In the Mac world, I like to do ProRes, but we can just go ahead and do H.264. That's not a big deal. You notice just by changing it to H.264, it has gotten rid of those black bars at the top and the bottom. But you want to go through here and check. It's 1920 by 1080. Yes, that's what I want. It's 23.976. Yes, that's what I want. The aspect is square pixels. That's what I want. If this was set to something else, you would notice again you have that black bar. So make sure you get rid of that before you export it. And it doesn't matter what you're going to do with this. All these other things look good as well. They've honed in on it pretty well. The presets are usually pretty close. And what I want to do is use my maximum render quality, and then I press export, and it'll go through and it'll render what it needs to render, and then it will export the rest. It's going to take about a minute or two to export. Now, what I'm doing is exporting the highest quality possible, and the reason I do that is because it's much easier to have a really high quality export and then run it through Media Encoder or something like that to make it an M4V or an MP4 to upload, to make it into DVD, whatever. But this way you have the highest quality possible in order to archive it, and that's what you're going to save. It's much easier to export one really high quality export when you're done with your project than to export 10 different ones, because this I can drop into a software and recompress it into whatever form I want. So there you go. Hopefully this gives you a better idea of what it's like to edit action scenes both from documentary and from the fiction world. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.